Hey, Dominic, thanks for having me. I'm Jamie Waller, and I'm an entrepreneur and philanthropist from London in the UK, but operate a number of businesses in the UK, US, and Australia.
And you're famous, infamous, certainly an advocate for dyslexic rights.
Yeah, all of the above, I guess. So I am dyslexic. I'm the author of a recent book called The Dyslexic Edge, a previous book called Unsexy Business. But yeah, I have been spending the last 2 years really working hard to change the narrative around dyslexia, to one, give those with dyslexia the confidence to go out and try and achieve anything they put their mind to, but also to help those that actually are curious about dyslexic thinking on, well, are there dyslexic thinking tips that I might be able to implement in my own business or my own personal life strategy? So, and I've written a book about that with a number of contributors ranging from a number of BBC dragons, from Dragon's Den to the billionaire that is Sir Charles Dunstan and the billionaire that is Paul Orfalea from Ginkgo Print in the US. And also managed to spend a lot of time with Sir Richard Branson, one of the most famous dyslexics on earth.
What is dyslexia then?
Well, great question. And I mean, what I've come to realize in the last 2 years of working on this book, that it's nothing more than a useful title that government's given to deal with a screw up of theirs when they invented the learning system. I mean, the learning system, quite frankly, just wasn't designed to cater for everybody. You know, it caters for the majority. But not the minority that really struggle to learn in the fashion of reading and writing that, let's be honest, was created by the church to try and stop knowledge drain of people forgetting the stories of the Bible. And we created a learning system where we expect people to learn from history, from things that have been done before. The problem with those that we coin as dyslexic these days is the human brain's designed to dump useless information to make way for new information. And if you're classified as dyslexic, then the reality is you've got much more of an explorative mind, which means you are constantly searching for new things, which means your brain is more likely than most people's brains to dump information constantly, because you just believe that if it's known information, I don't want to exploit this stuff. I want to go out and find new information. So I worked with a great academic on this book, Dr. Helen Taylor, who's got some fascinating published research about exploiters versus explorers, which is that as we are born, 15% of us are born explorers, 85% of us are born exploiters. Now, if you think back to pre-500 years ago, the explorers were absolutely necessary to find new territory, find food, bring things back for the exploiters to exploit. I don't need to point out why it's important to have more exploiters than explorers. That's obvious. But explorers simply don't learn in the same way as exploiters. Their brains are wired differently, and because we designed an education system that wasn't suitable for all, we've decided to give those people a term of dyslexia, which allows us to allocate some funding to it and say we're doing something about it.
You know, if you look at the overlap between entrepreneurs and dyslexics, certainly one of the ways in which people have defined entrepreneurism is that entrepreneurs have a higher appetite for risk. In your research, did you find some overlap, or is it just coincidence that lots of entrepreneurs also seem to be dyslexic? Or maybe that seem to be explorers, I guess, to use your other phrase.
Exactly, and that's the narrative that I would like to see changed over the coming months and years, which is, would you expect an explorer to be more of a risk taker? Of course. Would you expect an explorer to be more used to failure or robust in their processes of failure? Of course. They go out every day trying to find things. Sometimes they don't find anything. Would you expect an explorer to be able to resource investigate, to be able to get people to do stuff, to be able to delegate well? Yes, of course, because once they've explored and they've found something, they normally hand it off for somebody to exploit. So explorers, of course, make great entrepreneurs. And the reality is explorers learn differently, and we've given that a badge of a dyslexia.
What about, because certainly it affects, different people at different levels. What proportion of the population are, profoundly impacted? And again, it seems to me that it can be reading and writing, can be maths. Where do you where did your research take you on?
Well, I think that's a great question, Dominic, and there's definitely varying scales. And I, one of the passions for me doing this book was I don't think it's useful to simply change narrative to dyslexia as a superpower, which some people have attempted to do. Without a doubt, those with dyslexia still are negatively impacted by it on a daily basis. And the level of dyslexia does change dramatically. I mean, for me, it's spelling and reading to an extent not as bad as my by spelling, but some it's to the degree where they simply can't work with numbers or words, and that would be very different if you were trying to get into entrepreneurship. One of the statistics, or a couple of the statistics that we shouldn't ignore, though, is that while 15% of the population are considered to be dyslexic, so are 35% of all entrepreneurs. And another statistic, which is really telling, is 40% of all self-made millionaires are considered to be dyslexic. So there is, without a doubt, a connection between dyslexia and, as I would say, exploring in new territories in entrepreneurship. But I should also point out that 50% of all prisoners are dyslexic too. We've all heard the stories that entrepreneurs could have gone either way, some people say, and that's obviously very, very evident in 40% of self-made millionaires and over 50% of prisoners. That would lead you to believe that actually, if you're dyslexic, if you're an explorer, you really can go one of either ways. So what I'm quite passionate about is how do we start to change the narrative around dyslexia so that people that are at a younger age. I mean, I grew up in Bethnal Green, a really rough part of East London, where I could have easily gone into selling drugs and various other things, but I chose to want to go be a window cleaner. I set up my first business age 16 as a window cleaner and then on to car sales. But I could have easily made, every morning I woke up, I had a choice. Go and clean people's windows, sell drugs. Go and clean people's windows, sell drugs. And I continuously made the right decision. I think it's really important that we try to promote to those without an education or with not a great education that there are other options out there for them than simply following the money, which if you're growing up in a poor part of the UK or anywhere in the world, if you're following the money, you're generally, unless you've got an inspirational sort of local shopkeeper or an inspirational local builder in your street, you're probably going to be following the drug dealer.
It's interesting. I spoke to the head of HR for McDonald's in the Republic of Ireland a few years ago. And I was asking him, who his ideal store manager were, or restaurant managers were. And he said, Dom, they're mostly blokes who are 21. And at 21, they left school with nothing. And then they get to 21 and they go, bollocks, I am going to be poor my entire life unless I get a grip of my shit. Okay, I'm going to go and work at McDonald's. And so McDonald's were saying, look, if you've got entrepreneurial aspirations, but you left school with nothing, but now you want to turn your life around, come and run one of our stores, because in 3 years, we'll teach you stuff that's not like going back to school, but is, amazing life skills. And he said, that not only did that they were the best people to hire, but from his perspective, then you'd see these people transform their lives whilst working for McDonald's for a few years. And he said,
and what a brilliant story. And I mean, a more recent one is Timpson's, right? I mean, James Timpson has been taking prisoners out of prison for the past 20 years and giving them the responsibility to run a shoe repair and key cutting shop. And they are making great local business owners. So, and I've been doing some work over the last 5 years. I went into the Prince's Trust here in the UK and set up a department called the Enterprise Network, which was entrepreneurs supporting young, less advantaged people to get into business. And some of the work we did was going into prisons to make people realize that when you come out of prison, it might be difficult to get a certain type of job, but it's really not difficult to set up your own business. Nobody checks your criminal record when you go onto Company's House to set up such a .com, or when you go onto GoDaddy to buy your domain name. So we started to deliver educational programs in prison for people to come out and set up their own businesses. And one of the most just brilliant success stories we had with that is the Princess Trust were inside a prison working in Holloway, the female prison, with a young girl that had gone to prison that grew up in Tottenham. And she set up an online florist while in prison. So she was coming out of her cell all day, working for 8, 10, 12 hours a day online. And people were ordering flowers, and they were getting delivered by her pressing a few keys of her laptop from a prison cell or from a prison working space straight to people's doors. So when she came out of prison, she had a business. And I saw her just a few months ago. She's now, employing 4 or 5 different people. She has a shop. She's out of prison, and she's built a life for herself.
Which is fantastic. A good mate of mine, Headley, ran a digital marketing business up in Yorkshire next to a category D prison. And, he would recruit inside the prison system, and the employees would end up at the prison round the corner. And then, as they were coming up for release, they'd come out and do day release in his office to try and set them up, and people would go, yeah, it's amazing for you, mate. You've got, all these cheap people, but God, the effort it was to run his business and to put, to continually, employ people inside the prison system was not easy at all. It was a labor of love on his part, definitely, to do that. But the recidivism rate was tiny, because, people had something on the outside to, something to do. Fascinating.
Well, it's an interesting relationship that we, the public, have with people that have been to prison, actually, if I can share this story with you, because, it's weird that we all celebrate the Timpson story. We're like, yeah, they take these prisoners and they give them this, opportunity. Aren't they nice? Mainly men, right? Aren't they nice guys that cut my keys and take my shoes and put new soles on them? But actually, one of my first significant businesses that I was in the financial services sector, and I employed somebody who had been sentenced, I think it was to 6 or 8 years in prison, and he had served a part of it, let's say a third or half of it. He came out, and it was 10 years before he came to see me for a job. But he came transparently. I knew about his past, and I recruited him because I thought he was brilliant at what he did, and he would be great for our organization. And I considered that he had spent his time in jail. He had been punished, and he deserved to be given an opportunity. One of my competitors got hold of this information, and they started setting up these websites and plowing every single client of mine in the financial services sector, saying he recruits people that have been to prison and da-da-da-da. And I got all of these clients from very, very notable government public authorities suspend me overnight, saying, we're suspending your service until you can explain this to us. And it was amazing to see this sort of behavior. And I just went straight out, and we had the press contact us and stuff, and did a big press statement as the CEO and founder, saying, we support the reoffenders, the reappointment of offenders. We support that once you have served your time, you have been punished, and you should be integrated back into society. And it was a really risky move. A lot of people around me were saying, do not do it, just sack it. It's easier, just get rid of it. And I was like, no, I'm gonna stand up for him here. And actually, it went down very well for us in the end. But God, it cost us tens of thousands of pounds, loads of sleepless nights. People just simply, it was weird that it's almost like it's okay to support prisoners if they're going to clean your shoes or cut your keys. It's not okay if they're going to sit in an office and face off to you at a higher level in government services. And it was really eye-opening. It was part of my driver to do the work I did with the Princess Trust.
I was going to say what made you do that, and it's that sort of unfairness, really.
Yes. So that is you were asking earlier on about sort of dyslexic traits and stuff. So when we started to research and write the book, we went in with all of these ideas that we thought, dyslexic people, they're all like this, or dyslexic people, they're all like that. And every time we came away, if 2 people said the same, we were like, we found something. And the reality is we really didn't. Everybody had different levels of dyslexia, and some, liked exercise, some didn't like exercise, some had trouble spelling, some didn't have trouble spelling. But one of the things that we did find, the true thing that went through every single dyslexic thinker. We couldn't connect to just being an explorer. So we thought maybe this is something that you're not born with. Maybe it's something that develops because you've got this issue with learning as you go on. And this is this sense of injustice. Everybody that we spoke to has a huge sort of almost aggression towards any sense of injustice. If they see injustice, they have to resolve it. A lot of them set up businesses within it. A lot of them go out of their way to do charitable work to try and put an end to it. And a lot of them have real issues with authority around it. So if they see sort of a police officer treating someone badly, a dyslexic thinker is likely to be the person who says, "Oi, stop. Just because you're a police officer doesn't give you the right to do that," and get themselves in some trouble too. So, we featured 14 people through the book, and it got some great stories in there from sort of Kelly Hoppen, the famous interior designer who got through in prison for a few days in South Africa for her just disability to be able to not be able to walk away. She had to stand up for what she thought was right. And the same with Duncan Bannatyne here in the UK had done the same and got through into prison for a few weeks. But it's definitely something that's connected to dyslexia, and it's really interesting to see that play out.
So when in the intro you said dyslexic thinking that people who aren't dyslexic could potentially use in their business. What are some of the things that you found there?
I mean, some of the really soft ones, but quite, useful ones are the way dyslexic thinkers and a lot of them tend to, for example, when they public speak, they tend to connect certain themes because obviously to be dyslexic, it's not really easy. They're normally quite good at public speaking because they're used to having to communicate things rather than write things.
Totally.
But they're not very good at staying on theme because they can't really read and digest the information to remember it that well. And they're not that good looking at cue cards because they go off piste quite a lot. But what we found a lot of them start to talk about is how they connect certain things in rooms to certain themes. So, for example, there might be a fire exit sign, and they will, while they're sat in the audience waiting for their time to speak, they'll go, "The fire exit sign is going to remind me to talk about when I exited my first business. The chair that I leave is going to be the only chair in the room. That's going to remind me to talk about the chair person that I employed that tried to screw me over." And they're really good at connecting these little things. And what we do at the end of every chapter is we take, let's say, Theo Paphitis, the BBC Dragon and retailer, we'll take his chapter and we'll go, okay, these are typical dyslexic thinking tricks that Theo has used throughout his career that anybody can implement themselves too. And we do that for every chapter. And that was quite a nice bit to do. Helen and I sat down saying, is that really a dyslexic thinking trick, or is it just a thing? Is it just a tool that anybody might use?
Fascinating. And have you got kids?
I do. 2 girls, 2 daughters, 7 and 8.
And are they dyslexic?
So I would have thought my 7-year-old is definitely, we're being told she is. So my wife is saying, we should get her tested, and I obviously I push against it because I'm saying, well, for what reason? Now, it's not that I don't believe in testing, and I should make that clear, that I think if you believe that testing is going to get your child the support they need, or is going to give you some comfort to enable you to get off your ass and get the child the support they need, then you should go and get tested. But I know my child's got dyslexia, and I don't think her being badged with that at the moment is suitable for her, or useful for her, I should say, more importantly. At the moment, they have the last laugh every morning and every evening. So I'll give you, this is a live example from this morning. It's great that you asked this question. So yesterday afternoon, my children went to the Science Museum in London, and I'm quite soon about to go to space with Richard Branson on Virgin Galactic. And they went and watched this 3D IMAX thing about the International Space Station. And they came back to me and they said, "Daddy, did you know that there's some evidence between dyslexia and when you come back from space that you show some signs of dyslexia? And I was like, yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? So we started to talk about it. And they said, so, and my youngest, who's 7, who's very witty and great and is probably dyslexic, said to me, does that mean when you come back, you're not even going to be able to talk? She's like, is your dyslexia going to get worse? You know, it was so funny. So look, at the moment they laugh at me, you know, they're like, oh, daddy, I say to my 8-year-old, who's like much more like my wife, she loves reading and stuff like that. I said to her, can I read to you tonight? And she's like, I don't know. It's a really difficult book, Daddy. You know, and they get to laugh at it. So, but I love it. But I absolutely love it because it's given them this sort of spirit around dyslexia that if my daddy's dyslexic and he can go off and write books, and we see him with Richard Branson and we see him on TV and we see him in publications and, you know, we see success, then it's not a bad thing. So by the time if Allegra comes around to having to be tested or having to be told or acknowledging herself, she's just going to see it as nothing more than a potential positive.
Yes, indeed. What's your other daughter called?
Amelie and Allegra.
Oh, well, I've got Araminta and Allegra. Yeah.
Oh, really? Allegra's not that of a common name either.
No, indeed. She's 10 and Minty's 8. So, yeah,
okay.
Similar ages.
Yeah, I mean, it's wonderful, right? And I love having these sort of playful games with them about my dyslexia. And, you know, it's been great for me, Dominic. It's been great for me to be able to accept it and talk about it more and stuff like that. So I hid my dyslexia until I was 36. Actually, I was listening to a podcast recently, which it had this, the host of the podcast is sort of this 56-year-old professor, ultra wealthy, done really well, and his co-host is sort of a 25-year-old lad. And the professor says to his co-host, they were talking about psychedelics. The professor had been off and done some psychedelics at the weekend in some Norwegian camp or something. And he says to his co-host, so tell me, Ed, have you ever done any psychedelics? And Ed says, I'm not going to answer that because, one, I'm too young and not successful enough to be able to get away with telling you the truth. And I thought it was brilliant. What a brilliant way to answer it. And I found that with dyslexia. I came out and told the world I was dyslexic after I sold my first business for over 40 million quid. Before then, I did everything to hide it. Everything possible to hide it. So I want to empower people because I believe that it's life-changing when you come out and go, I'm dyslexic, I need to get on with it. It enables you to ask for help. It enables you to lean on people. It enables you to inspire others. So I want people to come out and be able to say I'm dyslexic as soon as they need to or want to.
Totally. Well, I'm dyslexic, and my eldest son, who's 27, is dyslexic as well. Yeah, profoundly. I think he's read one book in his life. And, you know, so I think as I was going through education, you know, I remember, you know, we used to wear short trousers at school, and I used to get a 1 meter ruler across the back of the thighs every week from Mrs. Murta because I had yet again failed to learn the spelling test correctly. And, you know, I can misspell the same word 10 times in one essay, you know. Like the teachers used to say, how can you misspell this word like so many different ways? And then as I started coaching, I'm on my feet writing on a whiteboard. And my it's terrible. I mean, it used to be mortifying. And it used to fill me with dread. Now I just stop and I turn around and I just say to the audience, like, how do I spell that? And people, somebody always says, there's always somebody who can, you know, but overcoming that level of awkwardness takes some doing.
But it's really powerful, right? I mean, when I was younger, you know, we all grew up where doctors were considered not stupid, clearly, if you're a GP, but their handwriting was unreadable. It was horrendous. So I remember from a very young age making a purpose decision to have the worst type of handwriting ever, because I knew that it would avoid people seeing my spelling mistakes. But just because I had bad handwriting didn't mean I was thick. So now I've still got this terrible bloody handwriting, but my spelling has improved in time.
I'm the same. My handwriting is just shocking, and it is that. It is, if I just do it like that, you can't tell how many M's or T's
if I just leave some letters out and join them up, it will all make sense, right? Well, I mean, to someone sat looking at the whiteboard, they're like, "What does that mean?" But in our heads, it all makes sense.
Totally. Well, the worst thing is, I look at it a week later, I look at the picture of it, and I go, "Even I can't read that. God, what was I writing? Terrible."
I do.
So, look. How come you're going into space?
Why am I going into space? Well, I guess I was born an adventurer, right? So I'm an explorer, and I love to I do loads of challenges. So I've sailed across oceans, I've kayaked around countries, trekked across deserts. I did my first ever real adventure as an 8-year-old boy, where we took a team of us went on a motorcycle across the Sahara Desert. And I was in a motorcycle display team for disadvantaged children, age 5 to 16. So, I learned to ride a motorbike age 5. I learned to jump a motorbike through fire age 11. I learned to jump motorbikes over cars age 14. So it's really difficult for me to sit still. I need some challenge to keep me ticking. And every couple of years, I try to undertake the next big challenge. And currently on the horizon, I've got another desert challenge in December of this year, and space in 2025. And I've got a round the world sailing trip with my children in 2028. So there are 3 big adventures that I've got planned.
Do you have to get fit to go to space, or do you just have to turn up and get on?
Yeah, not really. So I've been out to spaceport a few times with the Virgin Galactic team, and been really privileged to see some of the first flights go up. There's been 7, I think, to date, and I've been to see 3 of those. And no, the reality is the people that can, 1, afford to go to space, and 2, are happy to take the risk of potentially not coming back from space, are generally those above the age of 60, slightly overweight and wealthy.
Okay, and
so I'm a slight, I'm out of the ordinary.
And the trip around the world with the kids, you taking them out of school? How long does it take?
Taking them out of school, 2 years, yeah. Leave in December 2028. So miss sort of a term, a year and a half of academic times. We will take somebody with us to help deal with children for that long in a small environment and help teach them.
So you don't murder them halfway across the Pacific.
So we don't murder them. But yeah, it's always been on my agenda since we had our first child that it would be great to take some time out with them. And I've always tried to work out, well, what's the suitable age? We were really lucky that during the COVID stuff around the world, that we spent a considerable amount of time, about 16 months on a boat living together. And we did the whole Mediterranean. And this is just an extension to that, really, to go and see the world with your children in that environment of sort of, the big environment of the seas, the risk taking, but also just what a wonderful thing to do as a family, as we've got the opportunity to do so,
Fabulous. Before they get to secondary school.
Yeah. So just at that cusp level. And we actually, we have done all of our planning around that. So we moved our children recently into a school that goes all the way through to their 18, so that we weren't restricted by this 11 plus period, because it really does get in the way, we thought, of the best opportune time to do a trip like that with your children, where they're curious enough, where they're not bored senseless of being on a boat in the middle of the ocean with their parents, but they're not too young to get stuck in and help and ultimately enjoy it. So it was a real challenge for us, because they were in a girls' school, they were in a prep school. That meant that they would have had to have we would have had to have taken them at sort of 8 and 9 or 13 and 14, which just are not great times.
So look, let's dive into some of the businesses that you're involved in.
Yeah. So, so obviously business has been part of. So since I was 16, I've started and grown businesses. I'm very much the startup guy. So I love that, curious ideas. Who can we kill? Who are we going after? What's going to get me up every morning and get me in the office? The post-it stage. And I love building businesses. And then I get very, very bored. And I like exiting them too. So I'm fortunate that I've had two significant exits. One, as I mentioned earlier on in 2016, for sort of upwards of 40 million. Another one for tens of millions. And now I own a couple of businesses outright that sort of trade here, US, Australia, worth tens of millions again. And I'm always looking for the next new idea. But outside of that, when I sold my first business too, I set up an investment portfolio. So I really wanted to start to invest in other people's businesses and see what I could learn from other sectors, other industries. And my first investment in the portfolio was a brand that many people will know called Dyslexia, which we exited a couple of years ago. So Dyslexia, typically protein balls at the time, in two cafe locations in London. And she used to write lots of books, and we worked with that business to take it from more of a physical location and publishing company, which it was, to be more of a media company. So we developed an app, stopped writing books, put the content onto an app base, and started delivering sort of healthy lifestyle habits. And that was an amazing success. And we exited that last year. Another that you're probably aware of, and most of your viewers and listeners will be aware of, is the men's clothing brand Spoke. Was my third investment, and I'm still invested with them today. And that's been a great business. Was here in the UK simply doing chinos at the time, is now here in the US doing sort of denim, t-shirts, chinos, and various other things, and rode that really difficult period of COVID, and really came out a much stronger, more leaner business. And then I've got 13 businesses in the portfolio, so ranging from data protection companies to IT container businesses, taking old legacy software, putting it into containers to enable you to manage it and not have to pay substantial sort of switching fees, because a lot of these larger organizations get this sort of throat hold of you to say, well, if you don't upgrade your system at a cost of £6 million, when we will no longer support it. So we can go into those organizations, throw the system into a container, which enables us to help support it for them. So we've got a number of things. And it's great. It suits my brain type, which is sort of pivoting from one thing to another, sort of 20 times a day. So, I can be on the phone talking about IT and data security at 8:04, and then at 8:07 I can be talking about pets and vets. And, but it's something I enjoy.
Do you have ADHD as well?
I do, yeah. So I was I was diagnosed with ADHD a couple of years ago.
How much overlap is there between ADHD and dyslexia, do you think? Or are they two labels for the same underlying thing? Or
yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, isn't it? And this is, I find it challenging to ever answer this the same, because you're right. I mean, this whole dyslexia thing, I think it is simply a badge to, being given for convenience. ADHD is obviously a solid form of neurodiversity that has these very solid traits associated with it. There are a lot of entwinings of those worlds that meet. So a lot of people with dyslexia also have ADHD, and some of the traits are similar. But my ADHD, for example, it makes me very busy. And I would say the most negative thing for me about ADHD is it makes me a terrible, terrible sleeper. It makes it really difficult for me to switch off. And a lot of people with ADHD have severe sleeping problems, so those, when you hear those entrepreneurs who go, well, I sleep for 4 hours a night, and look at me, the potential for them to have ADHD is hugely significant. And it's probably the ADHD, not this sort of entrepreneurial business trait that's making them suffer.
Because there's only a tiny fraction of people who can get away with little sleep, as Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, bigged each other up for how little sleep they got, and then both of them ended up with Alzheimer's. That you need your sleep.
Yeah, I've been really, really focusing on it for the past 2 years, and I mean it's how this book came about. So I suffer with ADHD and dyslexia. I suffer with huge sleep problems. So sometimes some nights, actually last night was a terrible night. I had 2 hours 50 minutes sleep last night,
God.
and so I started work at about 10 to 3 this morning, and we're recording this at 11:40 in the afternoon. I don't need much sleep. It doesn't have the same impact on me as others, but I want more sleep because I recognize it's not a positive thing. But 2 years ago, that's what, Richard Branson and I was on a cycle ride talking about. It was Richard giving me his sleep doctor's details and tips on sleeping that got us talking about the connection between ADHD, dyslexia, and was bad sleeping a dyslexic issue or an ADHD issue. And that's what led me to start to think about writing this book.
I see. And so what's in the book about sleep then?
There's nothing in the book about sleep. So what is absolutely clear to me now is that ADHD is the connection to sleep issues, not dyslexia.
Right. Okay. I see. And so what are your top tips for people with ADHD who have sleep challenges then? What have you found works?
So my top tips for a supplement is a supplement called GABA, which is you can buy. It's not something you can just go into any pharmacy and buy, but it's available in the UK legally. So you can simply go online and search for GABA. And GABA has the same. Has a similar effect as alcohol. So one thing I should say is there's a huge connection between ADHD and alcohol abuse because of sleep. So a lot of people with ADHD use alcohol to tame the mind to get to sleep. And I certainly have been guilty of that in the past in my life of, need to have a couple of whiskeys before bed just to be able to initially get to sleep. And what GABA does is GABA has a similar effect as alcohol without the negatives. So it quietens the mind. And it's a great supplement. So I went to see a doctor after talking extensively with Sir Richard Branson about this. When I got back 2 years ago, I undertook some cognitive behavior therapy. Part of that CBT was to try GABA. You do need to cycle it, otherwise the body becomes used to it. But that's been a game changer for me. Yeah, you can tell from my last night's sleep pattern that I'm in a cycle period and not on it at the moment. But yeah, it enables you to get to sleep and stay asleep much, much more effective. So that for a supplement. But from a behavioral thing, the CBT was really life-changing. It's a horrible process to go through because they restrict your sleeping to just an hour and a half a night for a week and then 2.5 hours a night for a week. By the time you get to week 4, you're ready to kill somebody, But what that's about is, nothing you wouldn't have heard in a million podcasts to date, but it's about making your environment for sleep just for sleep, no mobile phones, switch off an hour before. The bed should be for sleep or sex. It shouldn't be for tweeting or responding to emails. And that has an amazing impact. Dark, cool. Some things are not always achievable. We've just moved home, and we're still waiting for certain blinds to. So hence my bad sleep last night is because my environment has changed and my environment currently isn't suitable for my sleep, which needs to be pitch black, really cool, and without any noise. But it does. I do know what works now. And prior to 2 years ago, my average sleep was between 3 hours and 40 and 4 hours and 20 minutes a night. In the last 2 years, my average sleep has been over 6 hours. And on many occasions during the week, 7 hours plus.
Fab. So much more like a normal sleep pattern.
Absolutely unbelievable. Yeah. Unbelievable. But it took a lot of effort and it requires a lot of effort still.
Yeah. I've got some quick fire questions. What drives you every day?
To leave a legacy, to make my children and everybody that comes into contact with me realize that anything is possible. I mean, I grew up in Bethnal Green in a 2-bedroom flat. I was born dyslexic with ADHD, colorblind and poor. And I have gone on to work for the King at the Prince's Trust, achieve more success than I could have ever wanted, and I'm 45 and still have the energy of my 21-year-old self. And I want to continue to live life like that to the full, with that be achieving amazing adventures in going to space, starting up companies, helping charities. I just want to keep doing stuff all of the time.
Fab. What's your genius?
I'm curious.
What unpopular opinion do you hold?
For many years, it was that through hard work, anybody could achieve success. And I think as I've aged, I've realized that's a really unfair view to have. Some people simply are not in a position to achieve things.
So they just don't have the opportunity, you mean?
Yeah, they just don't have the opportunity. It's easy for me to say I was born poor, dyslexic, but I had a really, really loving, supportive mother that would have, taken her shoes off and given to me if my shoes had worn out and gone barefooted. She was the backbone of who I am today. So some people just wouldn't have had that. And so I think it's really unfair. I think it's really easy to find 75-year-old white men tell you how hard work and determination you can achieve anything. You try being 75, an immigrant from Africa, arrived in Birmingham, like one of the contributors of this book called The Black Farmer, dyslexic, poor, 7 brothers living in a 2-bedroom flat. He is now a multimillionaire and very successful, but it's a very different life story to that of, let's say, Duncan Bannatyne, who's of a similar age and born in the UK. There is a huge privilege to being born white and male in almost every developed country in the world.
What's the most significant risk you've taken?
Well, from an adventure point of view, I've sailed across oceans and swum around oceans, kayaked around countries, crossed deserts. So I take risks all of the time. But I would have said the most significant risk I took was meeting my wife. I was very much a not settle down, live my life to the full person, and did not want to get married and have children. And I met my wife, and when I failed to mention this in the first year to her, when I told her in year 2 that I didn't intend to get married or have children, she was bitterly pissed off and disappointed. So I made a decision, and I took the risk that she was the right person for me to change that attitude. And we've been married for 10 years and 2 beautiful children. And she's definitely, a huge reason I'm the person I am today, which is definitely a better person than I was 11 years ago.
Very good. How do you measure your success?
Happiness.
What's the most recent thing you've learned, or the most recent skill you've acquired?
Most recent thing I've learned is to be more playful. So I'm spending a lot of time at the moment with my children with this whole mindset of, never say no if it's for play. So my children are aware that if they ever ask me to play with them, whether that be a game of chess or to pretend to be a dinosaur in the garden or, caterpillar down the stairs, that the answer they will get is yes. And if that means me having to shut my laptop, get off a call, stop work, then I do that. And I do that every day. And the most recent skill I've learned is probably to lay on your belly and caterpillar down the staircase. So we've moved into a new house that has 76 steps, my eldest has told me. And they have had me caterpillaring down that a couple of times already, and we've only been living there 10 days. It's not easy at 45, I should add, by the way, no matter how fit you are.
Did they ride you whilst caterpillaring? Yeah, I see. That's what I thought you meant. Yeah, okay.
Two of them on my back.
What could go wrong? That sounds risky. What's the worst business advice you've ever received?
The stereotypical one of not to do something. I've always surrounded myself with brilliant people, but those brilliant people have to, in general, be people that pull against me and be the opposite to me, because that's what delivers better results. But yeah, I would say not to go back into business. So after I sold my first business, I owned 100% of that business. I was 36 years of age. I was extremely wealthy, and a number of people said to me, "Whatever you do, don't do that again. Enjoy your money, go and do it, because the percentage chances of you being able to be successful at setting up another business are so low. And I'm on number 4 since then. So I've started from scratch and built 4 businesses that are significant in value.
And lastly, what do you think is the biggest myth in business?
That you have to be horrible to succeed. And it's something that, I was guilty of for a number of years. I wasn't that fair to some people that I worked with. I wasn't that fair to some ex-partners, because I was just on this single-minded mission that, that I had to get up, work, succeed, get up, work, succeed. And I would have definitely trampled over some people on my way. And one of the things that I spent, the last 10 years doing is really understanding that, one of the most important things in business actually is to be kind. And it's not something that's portrayed often in business. Most people, if you think back to the TV shows that we would have grown up with, sort of EastEnders, let's say EastEnders for one. If you were an entrepreneur or business owner on EastEnders, you also had access to guns, or you hit people with metal bars every now and again. And that's sort of what we all grew up to begin to believe was needed to make you a success. And I spend a lot of time now about being more kind to people.
Okay. Well, look, you've get some inspiration from you as well. Look, you've written a great book called Unsexy Business, which is, looking at your debt collection business, but also looking at other people. The book on dyslexia is called
The Dyslexic Edge.
The Dyslexic Edge. What, other than those 2 books, then what might people pick up, get inspiration from, or maybe what podcasts do you listen to?
I'll stick to books if that's okay. But sort of against promoting other people's podcasts on podcasts. But from a book point of view, I think one of the best business books I've ever read is Good to Great. I think it's just a brilliant book. And what I love about Good to Great is as an entrepreneur, you could pick it up and you could use it as an active to-do list on a daily basis. You could carry it around with you all year and action things from it, and you will end up in a better place. And from a personal development point of view, one of the best books I've ever read in my life, and read it in the last year probably 3 times, is a book called Strength to Strength, written by a chap called Arthur C. Brooks. And the best way to describe it, it's sort of promoting almost, it's the theme is almost the 40-year apprentice, that you spend your first 40 years actually preparing for your next 40 years. And the importance of getting that transition right to ensure that you maintain purpose and vigor. Going back to your question on what drives you every day, it's ensuring that you do that transition well. It is a brilliant, brilliant book, really easy to read, not that big, but everybody I've recommended it to absolutely loves it.
Well, also that, that he talks in the book about how sharp he was in his 20s. And now when he looks at some of the work that he did in his 30s, he doesn't even understand it anymore.
Yeah.
But he's now, a teacher, and that sort of, that professor. And it's just that, it is that, wouldn't be where he is if he hadn't done those things, but different stages of life. And as you say, purpose.
Yeah, it's really important, isn't it? I mean, I always say to people, so, people try to convince me to retire at 35 when I sold my first business, and thankfully I ignored them. But retirement can be very damning for some people, and I think it's really important to plan well if you do intend to retire. And I think there's another book that I've been thinking of writing called Life After Exit, which is how many people get that wrong, and they sell their business and they end up very, very unhappy. Actually, a great friend of mine describes it as, he says, Jamie, don't ever become rich and irrelevant. And he says, you can't turn up at the next networking event telling people what you once did. They really don't care. They only care about what you're doing now. Some people can't transition into that life of golf that well. And I'm that person. So I'm lucky that I've recognized that without having to make the mistake. But I think that a lot of entrepreneurs are all thinking about the exit and the wealth creation and less about what they do. And I would like to see coaches and organizations set up courses, start to help people about planning for exit, because we all appoint corporate finance advisors to dress our businesses for exit. No one thinks about dressing the entrepreneur to what it's going to look like when you wake up on Monday morning with a bank balance of 20 million quid, but not a bloody thing to do.
We've worked with a number of clients who we've helped them with their exit. And we've worked with a probably equal number of clients where they've decided not to exit because actually they're enjoying running their company again. And that was one of the drives for exit, was just it had got to the point where it was no longer fun. Because I say to people all the time, like, once you say, what are you going to do? And they go, yeah, that is the, I don't know. But, if you're enjoying it, then, and you're making good money, if it's part of your purpose, because otherwise you end up on the other side of that with a hollowness.
Yeah. And it's a real thing in the UK, actually, because in the UK, we're all, certainly for entrepreneurs, we're sort of led to believe that you should start, build, and sell a business to become wealthy. And it's something to do with our public markets, that they've not done a good enough job educating us on what options are available through public market flotation. We all just see public market flotation as a pain in the arse. But the reality is, entrepreneurs that want to get their hands on their wealth but are not ready to give up and retire maybe shouldn't think about selling a business to start again, because it's not easy to start again. I mean, I've done it successfully, but it's not easy. But you could go and do a flotation on the AIM market. You will probably receive a 50% increase in valuation that you would have received through selling your business to private equity or a trade sale anyway. And you could take, let's say, 5, 6, 7, 8 million off the table, 10 million, however much, enough to have changed your life and make you feel now secure, because that's what you're really searching for. And you can still own your business and continue to grow it from there onwards. And also, if you're on the public market like the AIM, it's got huge inheritance tax benefits to it and other taxable savings. So the UK just doesn't do it. Nobody talks about it. But I think we need to do more to start to educate people that it's not all about getting into the Sunday Times saying this person sold their business for 50 million quid. You'd be better probably taking 5 million off them. Having 50 million quid is a pain in the arse. All you've got is all of these vultures from Coots, Hawes, every other private bank, UBS, calling you up, wanting to take you out for lunch, to buy you champagne, trying to get at your wife, trying to get hold of your children's funds in some sort of trust. It's a complete pain. Actually, you'd be much better off having 5 or 6 million and keeping the rest in the tax advantage wrapper of a public listed company and taking some dividends every year and building up future gains for your children. So I think there's a lot more to do around that stuff in the whole business landscape too, that I think we're just touching the surfaces of.
Very good. Great advice. Jamie, thank you very much indeed for chatting to me today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.